So it couldn't be a better, I think, panel. And I want to start right away asking about why do we need mid-market hotels? I'll start with you, Paul. Paul S. We have Paul S and Paul B. So I'll try to be clear.
Call everyone Paul. You'll be fine.
We've got that. We can share that.
First question is, why do we need mid-market hotels? I love staying in luxury hotels.
It's not a good question because we actually favour mid-scale economy hotels here. But we're going to give you a bit of an overview, I guess. When you see a market take off and try and position itself in a global environment, generally, and particularly in this area or this region, they use luxury and stand out and iconic brands and iconic hotels to do that. And that's totally understandable because that really gets the wow factor. It gets a lot of international interest. And of course, it gets everyone locally and internationally excited. But then comes the business cycle of hotels and I guess the cycle of demand and the cycle of movement. And that's where the money's made generally, which is where you come into the mid-scale and economy brands. And you look at, I guess everyone has that aspiration of staying in one of the iconic luxury brands, and that's great. And maybe that's once in a lifetime for the majority of the populations in the world. And the reality is that the majority of people in the world are really economy and mid-scale brand customers. So we need to continually offer that mid-scale and economy brand so the system continues on. So they have an aspiration of luxury, but the reality, once they've done that once or they save up for that, then the rest of their life in the world, they're still in that wonderful mid-scale and economy area. So that's primarily the biggest part of our business. So that's why we need and continually need to develop mid-scale and economy businesses because the majority of the population fits into that market.
And that's interesting because we were seeing this morning a presentation by Knight Frank where they highlighted the distribution between 5-star, 4-star and 3-star, where we saw for most of the Saudi big cities, there's a higher proportion of 5-star hotels typically, or then 4-star, and then 3-star is in the 10 to 20% range, right? Which is quite different from a lot of the other big cities. But then we understand as well, different cities are at different stage of development. And here, we're talking about two different topics within mid-market hotels. There's the higher returns, and then there is the needs of the future generations of Saudi travelers. So now first we'll talk about the returns aspect and the development aspect of these mid-market hotels. And Chadi, coming to you, you deal with a lot of developers, government developers, private sector developers. What are you hearing from them in terms of the interest for mid-market hotels? And firstly, what is your definition of mid-market hotels? Because it's not an official classification of anything.
Yeah,
it's not an STR.
Well, look, if we look at it from our brand segmentations, for me, mid-market hotels is more the select service hotels in a way. So you're looking at the 3-star to 4-star segmentation from our perspective. And when you say select services, it's basically selecting the service from reducing the service that you get in the hotel. You have the premium where you have your full room service 24 hours. In select service, usually that is looked at differently from one side to the other. From the developer's perspective, what I can tell you is that we've definitely seen a growth in demand for this mid-market segment or select service. We can see it in the pipeline. Right now, for example, in the Middle East, around 40% of our pipeline in the whole region is around the select service. In Saudi, is around 50%. When you compare it to our actually operating hotels right now in Saudi, we have only 30% of our operating hotels that are in the market. So you definitely see a growth in demand. And like any growth within any city, and you mentioned that we are going through a certain growth here in the market, you will see a certain diversification in the market. You will see a start, obviously, in the luxury, but slowly there is much more demand in the premium that will move down the line into a even higher demand into the select service. And there's something that we tend to forget as well. In any city, you can place one or two Ritz-Carltons, right? But when we look at it from a courtyard or in a loft, we can place at least 10 to 15 hotels in a city. So the growth is definitely exponential. It's definitely something that we see growing down the line.
That's great. So there's still a lot of development potential then for mid-market hotels. And Ayman, coming to you, here the question is the key to higher returns for owners, right? First question is, will a mid-market hotel give us a higher return? I know it's not a yes or no answer, but will it give us a higher return?
Yes. I mean, as you said, there's many different ways to look at it, but it also, you invest less. So it helps a lot of the developers get into the hotel game. You know, not any developer could just quickly get into and go for the ultra luxury or luxury hotel just because of how much it costs to get in. So some developers use it as a stepping stone as well. They want to test it. They've done different business types, and they heard or they have friends that have done it. So it's a lower risk for them by investing less money. And with the returns aspect of it, you operate much more efficiently. You build efficiently. So everything efficiency, it leads to better ROIs at the end in that term.
So it needs self-control, because once you're in the design, you want to add a bit of marble here and a bit of space here, and it's not easy.
It is definitely not easy, and it can be very interesting sometimes when you're sitting with a developer who keeps you on a tight budget and you want to make something, you know, a room a little bit bigger or a little bit better mattress, and like, no, the budget. Then you turn around and he's traveling somewhere and he sees a fountain that is highlight, and you come back and you find it in the lobby and costs $100,000. So they try to be efficient, but we do have to work together from the beginning and communicate. And I think that's how you get to a very nicely built mid-scale hotel that pleases everybody, the owner, the customer, and the operator.
Okay, and you did mention the, one of the reasons to develop a mid-market hotel is the lower investment cost. So, it can appeal to a broader audience of investors, right? The question then, which I want to go on to Paul, is regarding then, I would imagine the kind of investors maybe have different kind of lands. Maybe not in the central of the city because it's expensive, high-value lands. So does it work, developing a mid-market hotel? It's cheaper, so let me do it in a cheaper location. Is that, right or wrong?
Well, I'll start by echoing what Paul said, which is 80% of the passengers on the plane are in economy, and people coming to places like Saudi Arabia will judge their experience based on their hotel experience, and 80% of the people will be staying in mid-scale hotels. And therefore, these kind of brands have a huge impact on the impression of the destination. To answer your question, I think people will want to stay in a great location. If you design a mid-scale hotel properly, it can work in a grade A location. And you see this in Europe. You see brands like Citizen M in the center of London. And they make amazing returns. We have a number of hotels in the UAE that are in grade A locations, and our shareholders are very happy.
Oh, great. So talking about, we mentioned the critical success factors here. We touched on a few of them: the location, the cost, the controlling the design, controlling everything has to be efficient, the right mattress, even a bit of overspending will have an effect on the return on investment. So are there any other critical success factors as a developer that need to be taken into consideration, Paul? What's important to make this successful, and how do you get the higher returns for the owners?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's the reality is that there's a lot of things that go into making businesses work, and development and construction and costs and planning is a great start, and getting that underway and getting it done properly and finished properly safely and getting it open is the first step. And of course, the next step is the next 30 years or so of operation and interaction with whoever the owner is, whoever the operator is. And those need to be clear goals for each other. But I think probably one of the really interesting things here is, because you talked about systems and basics and keeping things together and minimal investment. I think there's a real change in this market now, where particularly from us, we were very much in the past. This brand means this brand means that. Doesn't matter if you're in Istanbul, it doesn't matter if you're in London or New York. This is what it's going to look like, and everyone wants to look the same. And I think that's turned around 180% now, and a little bit magnified by COVID and everyone wanting to escape out of their own house, but having what is essentially an experience, and knowing they're having a local experience rather than sitting a cookie cutter brand in every city in every country. I think that's really accelerated now. And there's nothing to say that a mid-scale economy hotel has to be boring anymore. You see so many examples. I mean, Citizen M's a great example. Ibis Styles is a great example, where you're not spending a fortune, but you're still getting a really relevant finished product for new markets, whether it's people that are 40, 50 or 18 or 30. It's really appealing to a lot more people. So I guess my thought is the message, yes, it needs to be controlled and you need discipline when you're going through construction, but the reality is you can create really cool things now without spending a fortune. And I think that's a message that's really important when we're talking to developers and owners, that while we've got iconic brands, they can still come to life and be really, really exciting for people. You don't need to go into, the lifestyle and all the boutique and all these things. It can exist at every level. It doesn't have to be, 5-star ultra luxury. It can be an economy and mid-scale as well. So not exactly answering your question, but giving some thought for everyone out there that's going to invest, that you can actually put something that's really market relevant into place that's not going to cost you a fortune in that mid-scale and economy section.
Talking about costing a fortune, the cost, obviously the cost control is very important. And we heard earlier a session on construction cost this morning. And obviously we know at the moment in Saudi, with the amount of construction going on, there is a pressure on construction costs. So it's very important then to be able to manage the design in the right way. And the question then is, can mid-market hotels be developed at the moment with that pressure on construction cost? Is that possible, Chadi?
You touch on a very, very important point, which is the construction cost. When you look at select service hotels, construction costs coupled with the land cost will literally make it or break it, because the owner needs to find the right. And let's not forget, it's not about just cost cutting, right? Because the owner needs to find the right balance between making sure that there is a certain consistency in quality that can be delivered in regards to the product, and at the same time making sure that it's as financially viable as possible. Because let's not forget, the customer of this select service hotel is very price sensitive. It's a customer that will shift directly whenever there's, with all the loyalty efforts that we have, obviously the price is very important to them. So from an owner's perspective, they need to find that balance. And to be fair, we've been hearing a lot here in the kingdom, certain feedbacks regarding construction costs and the difficulty in finding contractors given the growth that is being planned. And certain feedbacks that we got from certain owners is a different look, which is kind of an economy of scale look. Whereas when you're looking at developing a select service hotel, instead of looking at just one hotel, I'm going to multiply it. I'm going to get that contractor to commit to several hotels. And by expanding or having that economy of scale, I can reduce the cost over these hotels and build it a little bit more, cheaply, in a way.
Are you seeing investors also looking into different types of construction methods, like modular? Is that something you're... I know Marriott is not the contractor, so you're not the one developing, but are you hearing that?
This is a perfect question, actually, and we definitely have interest in regards to modular, especially since we've had that experience in Europe. We have a very, very nice and trendy brand called Moxie. And you touched on a very important point, Paul, is that select service doesn't have to be boring. Select service can be fun and exciting, and this is what Moxie is all about. We tried the modular experience within Europe, and especially when you find the right contractor to be able to do it, they will be able to deliver the product exactly like you want, because in the end, you can skip all the reviews and the design reviews because you'll be receiving a container with everything inside that container. Literally, you'll even have the hangers inside that room that is built, and you just have to build a concrete slab and put these rooms on top of each other. So in a way, you'll be skipping that whole design, and you'll be hopefully trying to build it at a lower price. But then the issue that you're going to be having is supply chain, right? So with the whole demand, you need to make sure, and especially especially after the whole delays that we had in supply chain after the pandemic, the timeline becomes a little bit difficult to maintain. But to answer your question in a short version, yeah, definitely there is interest. We haven't seen yet any proven, because there are certain licensing implications as well from a construction permits perspective. But there is certain interest. We certainly hope it's going to see. We're going to see some examples in the future.
Maybe Marriott should consider getting into the contracting business. I hear it's good these days.
We're focusing on yachts right now, and then move later on for something else.
Ayman, I feel, as a customer, I feel, we're talking about the new trendy type of, doesn't necessarily have to be that all are trendy, but the new generation of 3-star hotels, they also appeal to the non-3-star customers, which I felt was not the same, maybe 10, 20 years ago. It was not the same, because the 3-star was very 3-star. Now with 3-star is 3-star efficiency, even 2-star efficiency, but with the flair of, almost a 4-star with the small touches that you do. But then there's the other issue of, how do you balance that of being able to still keep it efficient and not actually turn it into a 4-star? If you're developing a 3-star hotel, how do you ensure that?
Us at Golden Tulip, MENA, and Louvre, we really focus on, from the beginning, hands-on approach with the developer, with the owner, with the designer. Especially, most of our brands are in the mid-scale stage, so we have a long history of being there. So we've also adapted. We're bringing back an old favorite of all the French people in the audience, Campanile. So we're trying to bring it into the Middle East. We're really focusing on the F&B. That's always been a very strong aspect of it, but it is a basic 3-star hotel in the past. So now how do we adapt it, but keeping the cost down, keeping this, but the main feature of it is going to be an F&B concept, restaurant, designed with our help from our chef school in Paris. That's just for Campanile. So you can keep the cost down by keeping the services limited, as Chadi was saying, and not adding everything. But you could add one item here, one item there. So we're not going to throw in a big gym and a big swimming pool and a big, but our focus and energy will be on this stand-up point, on this brand, which we think people, and then to your question, again, back to it, is that I used to stay at a 4 or 5-star because I want good food. 2-star, 3-star, for instance, always had, the grab-and-go sandwich. Now with the Campanile, you sit there, and you have those luxuries from the other star ratings, but you get them in the 3-star. So there's just different ways to do it, and just got to find the right formula for the right owner and for the right location.
Staying on the topic of efficiency, we see, as customers even, the difference in efficiency between mid-market, 3-star, 4-star hotels in, let's say, Europe and in the Middle East. In Europe, the stage is the public areas. This is the cafe, this is the reception, all of it together in one space. While in the Middle East, it's more generous. There's more spaces, bigger lobbies. Why is that? And do we see this changing in the next few years? Has it changed since, the mid-market hotels came into the region 5-10 years ago?
So I love the 2-star efficiency, 4-star flair. I think, honestly, mainly hoteliers get hung up on star ratings. I don't think guests really care. I think what they look at are the reviews. They read the last 20 reviews and they search by rating. So I think we get worried about that. I think guests in this region particularly have much higher expectations. And we've been spoiled. We've been spoiled by historically cheap labour costs. We've been spoiled by a lot of support from government and a lot of new inventory into the market, which has allowed the hotels to kind of operate at a much better level. I forgot your question, I'm sorry.
On the efficiency, the changes in efficiency.
Changes in efficiency.
From before to now in the Middle East versus Europe, because less efficient in the Middle East than in Europe, for example. Are we heading towards that direction?
I think we will see more and more efficiency.
This being the reception and the F&B space all in one?
I think if you look at some of the things that were on stage earlier, there was a lot of talk about blending retail with F&B and public spaces, and I think we'll see a lot more of that, a lot more of smart design moving forward.
Do we see customers here needing more space because being accustomed to more space in this region, or?
I think we're very used to having more space, and I think when we don't have it, we notice it. But we can be smart in design, and a lot of brands similar to Rove, we have very limited back of house, so it feels spacious. You feel you'll go into a double height lobby, you think you're in a upscale hotel. But reality is, behind the scenes, we're very much a 2-star operation.
Okay. And Paul, looking at the bigger picture of 100 million tourists by 2030, a lot of big goals to reach. How will mid-market hotels get us there? Are they needed to get us to those targets? And from Marriott's side, he was explaining the kind of pipeline differences between mid-market versus non-mid-market. Are you seeing the same trends in Accor?
Yeah, certainly. And probably just one comment on Paul's comment too is we've been absolutely spoilt to death in anywhere from Asia to the Middle East with space, with investment, with dollars, with demand to build bigger hotels. If you go to Europe or the States, you don't see many new hotels. In fact, you don't see any new hotels because the cost of land, labour, etc., all those sort of things. So I think we're really lucky to have the quality and the space that we do in this region and particularly in Asia. But sorry, where were we going with that?
With the Vision 2030.
That's right, Vision 2030.
And your pipeline of mid-market versus...
So is Midscale economy going to get us there? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. We've signed a couple of big deals recently in 2nd tier and 3rd tier cities, which probably aren't over popular for travel at the moment, either domestic and particularly international. But I think the whole desire of the vision is to have this country is not a one-stop shop. So it's not talking about the holy cities anymore. It's one stop on your tourist map, and then you go to someone else, then you go to somewhere else. And of course, again, I'll just go back to my first point is, we love to have the luxury resorts, and it's great to talk about them. The reality is they'll never have enough rooms to be able to supply 100 million, 30 million, 40 million customers. It's never going to happen. There's not an investor in the world that could do that or want to do that because there needs to be profitability. I guess the other point is, while we can build things and we can potentially get people to come here, we desperately need people to serve them. And that's going to be one of the restrictions and the log jams that one of the considerations of 2030 has, I know even one of the discussions we had on a signing we did today was the first question was, how are we going to fill these 1,000 rooms of staff? What are we going to do? How are we going to get these staff? Because it's competitive, and all my colleagues here are opening hotels, and it's going to be a competitive market. So, the reality is that in an economy or in a mid-scale hotel, we can put people through and we can train them and we can get them to a level where they can actually start taking leadership roles in those hotels. And that's probably going to assist our growth and our ability to man these hotels that are going to be produced towards 2030 and past that, because you won't get that expansion and that acceleration of skill set in five-star and luxury hotels, because it just doesn't happen that quickly. There's 1,000 reasons that we don't need to go into today, but your acceleration into senior management and leadership in an economy and mid-scale hotels like that, where it's very much flat and gradient generally in a luxury property. So, while we can talk about a lot of customers and we can talk about a lot of buildings, the essential part is being able to fill those buildings where people are going to supply quality service everywhere you go in Saudi, not just the high-profile areas at the moment, because the vision is to get people moving around, not making it a one-stop shop.
I think that's a very interesting point you mentioned regarding the attractiveness for young talent to come into this industry. And obviously the initial allure is from the luxury brands, I want to work in this luxury brand because I love the brand, I love to stay there as a guest. But the reality is often in a luxury hotel, you often end up doing a more menial task, and it's much more difficult to grow versus in a mid-market hotel, less staff, more responsibilities, multitasking. That brings me to the next question. Chadi, regarding the operating models we're seeing in mid-market hotels versus luxury hotels, we know, we've talked about robots and AI and, staffless hotels and all of that. And every, session that talks about that is, yes, it will benefit, it will help, but in luxury hotels, you need the touch, you need to speak to someone, you need that service. What about in mid-market hotels? Do we need anyone?
So yeah, you'll always need somebody actually to run the hotel. But I think there is certain efficiencies that can be created within running the hotel, and the select service gives you a certain flexibility that a luxury hotel will not be able to give you, because it's a little bit more, there's more policies and procedures in a way, and there's much higher expectation. And whenever we talk about select service hotels, I always have that image and that example that comes to my mind. I was with a family in Athens, and we had just opened a Moxie for the first a Moxie in Athens, and I went to visit the hotel. Step up to the reception, which is directly on the bar and serving coffee, and I asked them, where's the GM, so we can go and maybe have a look at the rooms. And the gentleman who's just at the bar tells me, he's just over there, he's gonna come. And I see a guy with the leaves rolled up, with a tray, with a coffee, just serving people, and he looks at me, he's like, 1 second, I'm gonna come to you. And I think that's definitely the spirit that we look at in terms of select service. When you look at select service, you don't have front office or guest relations or housekeeping. They look at expanding that role, and that gives a little bit more richness into the role. So you can do room service, you can expand it a little bit to reception, to housekeeping, and it gives you a little bit more of a overall look. And it keeps that excitement into that role. And you can see that much more into select service rather than luxury. And to touch and expand a little bit more on the trends that we're seeing, whether it's from the operations or from development, I'm just taking it a little bit further, but we've seen certain trends coming up on the select service market, and especially over the past 3 years. One of them is the operational expansion and the roles, obviously. The other one we've seen is something that we don't talk a lot about, that is existent on the select service, but the growth of service apartments and extended stay. And this is a segment that has proven highly resilient during the pandemic, and owners are seeing more and more the benefits of having long stays. So we've had a growth in demand for brands like Element and Residence Inn. Another point in regards to select service trends, we've seen a lot of demand for conversions. And we've had some select service flexible brands that can accommodate these conversions, especially for owners that are looking at having international operators. And one last but very important factor within the growth of select service is franchising. Franchising has been in high demand, especially on the select service. And we've seen it with owners that have a huge portfolio, and like all of us, we have owners that dip into residential, dip into office, dip into oil and gas. But slowly, we're noticing that the hospitality portfolio is growing within their wealth. And as that asset grows, they would like a little bit more involvement. And we've seen them set up an operational structure within their company, getting some more expertise for them to get involved, and that will allow them to manage their own hotels and grow on the franchise. And that, from a growth perspective, has been the biggest driver for growth from our brand's perspective.
Okay. You did talk about the extended stay type of business model, which was very resilient during COVID and generally during crisis as well. What about Airbnb? Because technically Airbnb unit is a select service type of unit. So is that something that, not specifically to any operator, but generally for the industry, is of worry, or is just another unit?
I think for Airbnb there has been a hype at the beginning when it just started that it's going to be a competition for the hospitality business, but I think it I think in the end we all agree that it ended up coexisting between both. I've traveled, in certain cases I've used Airbnbs myself, and in certain cases I've used the hotel myself. It depends on the demand of your travels. I think Airbnb in regards to select service, maybe it's a little bit, it's an exponential, in a way, select service, because basically you have no service whatsoever. And this is your own expectation. You just take the key, go into the hotel, but you're not going to have your room service, you're not going to have your housekeeping, you're not going to have all of this. You're going to have the laundry room that you're going to do yourself, but you're not going to have the service from the hotel. You're not going to have the desk or the concierge. So, for example, if you're traveling with a huge family and you want to stay in this and you can accept that for a week, it makes more sense. The travel of the hotel, if he's looking at that kind of service, will never choose Airbnb, and the traveler of Airbnb will never choose to stay in the hotel as well. So it depends, I think, on the demand of your own travels.
Okay. So it's kind of coexisting.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
It's quite different at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Ayman, talking about operational efficiency and about robots and UFOs and all that coming into play, do you have robots in your hotels? What do you think about IT, technology, what's coming up to make it more efficient, cost-effective, operational-wise? What's the trend on that?
Everybody's looking into it. I think every operator, some are ahead of others, but everybody is leaning in that direction, if not moving towards it. Right now we have a hotel, I think, in Lyon, Campanile as well. It's a smart Campanile. And I was talking to the GM. I haven't had a chance to go there. And he said they have robots doing many different tasks. One of them is room service, one of them is another. I said, one thing is, it's become an Instagram thing. Every guest that comes to the hotel is looking for the robot to take pictures with and post them. So there's another
So it's
part.
become less efficient, actually, because the robot is busy taking pictures.
We're charging them for that.
Yeah, okay, great. They're another revenue source.
Yeah. So, no, it's definitely needed. If you look at the Saudi market and the Saudi people, how the use of apps and technology here is very, very high. They're one of the leading in the world in using the new technology and looking at apps. So definitely there is a need, and these young travelers and not so young travelers that are using this technology are looking for that because it's become a major part of their life. So when they come to a hotel, they're used to it. So they're looking for it and they want to use it. So it's, again, efficiency for them, something they want. On the owner's side, it helps keeping the cost down. So less cost of operation, more profit for him, for the owner. So everybody has a reason to invest into it, and that's where we're heading. I mean, using the kiosks, all the different apps to open, the technology to chat with the front desk, so you don't even have to have a phone in the room. So again, cutting costs by not putting phone lines in all the rooms. So it's working, and I think we'll be finding more and more into it.
Yeah, no, and I think it's, as you said, it's watch the space. You know, everything that's happening in AI today, every day there's a new company that does a new AI service, and we say, wow, they can do that? You know, we are not AI experts, at least not me, but, you know, we'll see soon, I think, a lot more on that front. Going back to the new generation of travelers, you know, I want to understand, at the moment, obviously, there aren't that many international mid-market hotels in Saudi, right? But we understand that there is a huge opportunity for it. My question is the new generation here ready for that kind of product? Because it's something different, right? Do we see something outside of Saudi that gives us the, you know, impression that they are?
So a couple of things. So if we look at our hotels in the UAE, we're very heavy on Saudi guests.
Higher than the proportion in the UAE.
The proportion of visitor numbers. And there are a range of ages, actually. It's very interesting. But we have a lot of young Saudis that love staying in Rove. And I think you need to look at, if we look at the trends now, people are spending money on experiences. And depending on their reason for travel, they will, even if they can afford to stay in a luxury hotel, they will often spend $100 to stay in a hotel because they know full well they're going to be out doing something. I don't need a hotel with a spa and a butler and a robot because actually I want to get out and explore. So I think we'll see more and more of that as this trend continues. And this is going to happen in Saudi as well, and is happening.
Okay, great. Do you see that, Paul, the kind of expectations of the new generation of travelers in Saudi? Do you echo what Paul was saying?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, certainly do. I just wanted to pick up on the trends, absolutely. And I guess, you know, Saudis are extremely well travelled. And they see things. I saw one of the presentations before talking about the extraction of data where they were looking at food and beverage trends, and it was quite amazing, and seeing the different restaurants. It was fascinating. But they're obviously travelling outside here, seeing the international brands and expecting those international brands to implant here to live up to their travel expectations when they're going around domestically here too. It's an extension of the rest of the world. But I just wanted to pick up on the robotics for a minute, because we all think robotics is, oh, well, they are all, you know, pretty cool things that can run and jump and deliver drinks. But we had a couple of our colleagues, just for any operations people here from our Novotels in Australia, that have used robotics to take out the entire night audit system of a hotel. So the night audit doesn't do any paperwork anymore. There's a robot that does 15 hotels and takes that entire process away. So that's nowhere near as sexy as bringing room service or washing the floor, but from a practical point of view, adds a heap of benefit to the business, and who knows what other back office activities that can be taken up by a machine like that. Very cost effective and doesn't make too many mistakes unless we tell it to, obviously. But to answer the question again, very much I think the Saudi traveller and the Saudi traveller into the future, and the international traveller into the future, which is going to fill out, you know, a number of rooms, not just the local travellers from a mid-scale and economy and first, second and third tier cities, is well and truly ready for international brands to take up that space.
Okay. Our time is running out. Just the last question for Chadi. We talked about, you know, employment and training and career progression in mid-market hotels versus, you know, the rest of the industry. if there are no students here, but if there were, what would you say is the reasons for them to join the mid-market hotels in terms of it being a great training ground for someone to join the industry rather than joining a luxury hotel? Not that that's bad, obviously you have luxury hotels too.
I would say that both of them give you different experiences, but the way I look at it and seeing how the new generation is very ambitious, the way I would look at it is that the opportunities for growth in the select service are much faster than the opportunities for growth in the luxury. In the luxury segment, obviously, you get there's a certain hype around working in a Ritz-Carlton or a St. Regis, and there's certain standards that you uphold, and obviously the interaction with the guest is something completely different. But however, from a skill set perspective, in a select service hotel, you're going to be able to touch on most probably every single department and be knowledgeable about every single department and have a broader mind than just being focused, for example, on front office. So I think this is something for them to consider very strongly. Yeah.
Great. I think, great comments, positive for the investor, positive for the tourist, and positive for the staff, right? Yeah. Of course, with some challenges potentially on construction costs or risks that need to be mitigated and really looked at carefully. I think this is one of the critical success factors for mid-market hotels, right? It's the efficiency in design, in construction, in operations. And at the end of the day is, still thinking about not just, I want to target a cheaper customer. We're targeting everyone that wants to stay in a great location, in a great hotel, but doesn't have to be 5-star. And I think that's very important because, on paper, black and white, we're looking at 5-star, great location, 4-star, tier 2, 3-star, tier 3, 2-star. I don't even know where's the 2-star, where would the 2-star hotels be located? But I think that's a very interesting point that was discussed.
Just one thing, touch on what Paul was saying, that how the Saudi guests, younger, are going to Rove in Dubai, not because they can't afford to go to a more luxurious to spend more money, but it's because they want to spend the money somewhere else. So another thing that we've noticed is that people are starting to travel more. So when your budget for travel is whatever, 10,000 or 100, per year, if you could go one vacation and spend that amount, X amount, or you could go 5 times. So it's giving you more money to come back to the hotel. So it's not a big factor in the decision, when can I travel again? Oh, how much is the hotel? So you stay at these nice hotel where you get what you want out of them. So in a way, it helps enhance tourism.
Great, more frequent travel, more money to spend on, restaurants and retail and experiences and excursions and all of that. So, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you. Thank you.